I will remember because of a picture, go, oh yeah, so-and-so talked about something. And in fact, I have a sketch note from you from a conference several years ago, and I went back and looked at it to say, oh yeah, that's what Monica talked about. Tasks for apps, So you remember things better.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast, or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by my free weekly planner pages. I've created a downloadable set of planner pages for you that you can start using today. It's a great way to stay organized in the new year or anytime you like. Print them out to write in your daily schedule and tasks, or use the file on your tablet or computer to keep track of your to-do list and set your priorities each day. These planner pages are totally free, and you can find them at classtechtips.com/planner. This week's episode is titled Demystifying Sketchnoting for Students and Teachers with Karen Bosch. I met Karen a decade ago, and we're fellow Apple Distinguished Educators. She's always been my go-to person when it comes to sketchnoting, particularly the way she leverages the iPad and digital tools to create amazing designs and teach others how to do so too. I can't wait for you to hear Karen's advice, and I think by the end of the episode, you'll agree that sketchnoting may not be as hard as you think. Welcome to the podcast, Karen. I am so excited to chat with you today about sketchnoting. But before we jump into all of that, can you share a bit about your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
So I'm Karen Bosch. I am a retired pre-K through 8 technology teacher. I taught for many years at a small Christian school located just north of Detroit. And even though I'm retired, I still am enjoying doing a little bit in the EdTech world. I just get to kind of pick and choose the things that I like. So still do some presenting. I have done some work with schools, and I even have been teaching some online iPad creativity classes for kids on a platform called OutSchool. So those are some of the things that keep me busy, but I just do it at my own pace, which is very nice.
Yeah. And, we're talking today about sketchnoting, which I've had the privilege of seeing your work in action, right? As fellow Apple Distinguished Educators, hearing you speak about, the concept of sketchnoting. But for someone who maybe has seen it, but didn't know what it was called, or hasn't seen it, is just unfamiliar with the concept, what is sketchnoting? How would you define it?
So I describe it as a note-taking strategy, and you are combining drawing pictures with text, and then you use organizers, things like lines and bullet points and circles. And it's very similar to a graphic organizer or an infographic, but it is something that you are drawing by hand. And it is very much driven, not with just text, but also with pictures. So I would say that is my definition of a sketch note. And you do not need to be an artist to create an effective sketch note, because it is really about ideas and not about art. Sometimes you see somebody who's a professional sketch noter and you think, I could never do that. Mm-hmm. But it can be very personal. Simple drawings, stick figures work fine. And you can do it with paper, pencil, markers, notebooks, those kinds of things. But I do everything 100% digital on my iPad with my Apple Pencil. And the reason why I love doing it digitally, first of all, it simulates, the apps nowadays will simulate digital drawing tools. So it looks like crayon, it looks like watercolor, it looks like a marker, and you can get it in any color of the rainbow. So you don't have to go out and buy stuff for it. It's just all on your iPad. And then it is so forgiving. You can undo, you can erase, you can move, you can zoom in to do details, you can even trace pictures. So that flexibility for me is very freeing, but I think it also is for our students because they get frustrated when they can't do it right and then they wad up the paper and throw it away. So doing it digitally just really gives them a lot more freedom and flexibility.
Thank you for just that foundation and some of the vocabulary, right, to talk about this topic. And, I'm glad that you mentioned the technology comparison, like what it might look like offline versus with a digital tool. And just that idea that someone who might feel a little intimidated or not sure that this is for them, right? Or is like, I don't draw, right? The idea that they would have a tool that might help them draw that straighter line, right? If it snaps into place or gives them the power to undo, or they're not, struggling to find the perfect color in their pile of colored pencils. If they're doing something quickly, right? And creating something here, they can do, a few taps on their screen. So you shared a few of the main of the benefits, for kids, particularly with that crumpled up, paper example that we can all just visualize. But what are some of the main benefits of sketchnoting for students? How does it enhance their learning experience?
So when I started presenting about sketchnoting, I did a little bit of looking in at some research to see what I could find to support that. And there's some studies out there, and I've linked all of these things in my resource page that, first of all, benefit to writing by hand versus typewriting. There's studies that show that that is better for helping your memory, even just random doodling while you're listening. But the one study that I thought was the most compelling is by Hernandez, Wamas, and Mead, I think are the three authors. And they took a list of words, two groups. Group A had like 20, 30 seconds to look at each word and try and remember it. The other group was asked during those 20 to 30 seconds to draw something to help them remember. And the results were the people who drew, it doubled their ability to be able to recall those words. And I think that's pretty significant. And I think anytime you are asking your students to draw and visualize things, you're giving them something that's going to help those ideas stick in their head. And what I have found personally when I'm sketchnoting, which I think also transfers over to students, first of all, I am 100% focused. I don't think about the grocery shopping I need to do. I'm not distracted. I am in the zone because I have to listen. And there's no room for my mind to wander. And then I find I remember the content better because that whole process of organizing and pulling out the key ideas, really makes them stick in my mind. And putting those pictures with the ideas just makes them visual and sticky. And so I think visualizing learning, teaching our students how to visualize their learning is very, very powerful. And one other benefit is it's fun. And I revisit my sketch notes. I mean, I've got notebooks from conferences, paper notebooks, digital notebooks. The honest truth is, I never look back at them, but I have almost 600 sketch notes now in my iPad, and I go back and revisit them, and I will remember because of a picture, go, oh yeah, so-and-so talked about something. And in fact, I have a sketch note from you from a conference several years ago, and I went back and looked at it to say, oh yeah, that's what Monica talked about. Tasks before apps, So you remember things better, and it's just fun to revisit them. So those are some of the benefits I have found and that I think go with our students as well.
Yeah, and just, all those things, right, are ones that we're hoping to accomplish when working with a group. Boosting
Exactly.
engagement, boosting retention, having something that's going to be fun and meaningful and help kids focus when there's plenty of distractions, right, that they have on their mind as well. So I would love to talk about some examples of ways that you've integrated sketchnoting into the work that you've done with students. How have you brought this into your lessons?
So one of the things that I initially was tricky to me, we usually think of sketch notes, you're listening during a conference, but with students, I think teachers today, particularly elementary, middle school, you're not really lecturing, you're doing much more interactive things. So I actually started doing sketch notes to practice doing sermons in church. And so when I decided, I want to try this with students, I found some sermons on happiness that my kids could watch, little videos. And they did that. They watched it on the computer screen and then they sketch noted. And they loved it. And I was just so excited to see what they put together. And I found that once the students had learned that strategy, they would come back after chapel and say, they had to take notes. They say, look, I took notes and they were sketch notes. But then they were doing it on paper and pencil, but the strategy had gone with them. So then I started looking at other places where I could get videos. I've used a lot of discovery education videos for the kids to do sketch notes with. And because we were in a computer lab, they could watch it on screen. They could sketch note on their iPad. They could pause it. They can rewind it.
Yeah.
But even as a teacher, if you're watching it all together on the screen, the room's dark, but your iPad has some light. And I think that is the perfect way